Don't force yourself into a 14-year prison sentence to learn this lesson. Don't lose a 15-year marriage. Don't lose your career.
I have these people around me that I'm attracting at the end of the day, and I'm not taking responsibility, but I'm not moving forward in life. And people tell me every day practically, you don't take responsibility. What can I do to get out from under that situation? What do I do to get away from these people that are dragging me down?
Whatever ideas that I have manufactured in my head, here's the reality that I have to come to as a man. Until I address my 1%, I have no right to even start thinking about Josh's 99%. And what I have found is once I start looking at my 1%, okay, maybe Josh does have whatever personality, maybe it's all true. What's the 1% that I can actually control? Because I can't control Josh.
There's a lot of guys out there right now who their relationships are suffering. They find that it's always them that's getting broken up with. It's always the friends who rarely want to hang out with them. People avoid them. And they also find that they're not really going anywhere in life. They're just not making any progress. And it makes them feel really depressed. And the reason why is because these people do not take responsibility for their actions. You see, personal responsibility, it's like driving really fast down the highway. If you let go of the wheel, you're going to crash and burn into a future that you never chose. But that's the thing. You did choose it because you failed to take responsibility for your actions. Today we're joined by Jon and obviously Gabe. And what I want to ask you, Jon, is what does personal responsibility mean to you? What is it?
Well, thanks for having me, Josh and Gabe. It's a privilege to be with you again. I got to spend a little time with you a few months ago talking about leadership, and whether you want to be a leader or not, personal responsibility is the foundational attribute of being a man. Josh and Gabe, I know you guys are leaders of a very large men's empowerment group on Facebook, and without personal accountability, there is no real success. Because you're not responsible for yourself, so how can you be responsible for your successes? To me, personal responsibility means taking responsibility, taking ownership of both our choices and their consequences. Nothing happens to me. I invite things that happen into my life. And I could go into many, many stories about what that looks like. But when we think of what does it mean, the question I think that we can all ask ourselves is, how quick am I to point at something or someone else when something happens to me? And I think that the tendency for us as men, big picture, is to say, if it happens and I don't like it, it's somebody else's fault or something else's fault. If I like it, I did that. And I think that that is not personal responsibility. Personal responsibility says whether I like it or not, if it happened and I was a part of it, whether to me, for me, around me, behind me, between me, whatever, I take responsibility for that.
I like what you said about how, people always tend to point the finger at everyone else. It's the easy option. So many of us done it or have done it at some point in our life. And I like that saying where it says, you point your finger at someone else, you got three fingers pointing right back at you.
Absolutely.
And with that being said, how did you come to this mindset, Jon? What made you want to start taking responsibility in your life?
Well, I still don't know if I want to. I just now recognize how important it is. And it came after a life of not taking responsibility, a life of doing everything in my power. Again, when something good happened, oh man, that was me. Something not so good happened, not my fault. No. If so-and-so would have done their job, if such and such would have worked the way it was supposed to, if, whatever it was, that was how I lived. And so because of that, I lived a life of deceit. I lived a life of manipulation. I lived a life that was characterized by anything except responsibility. And I mentioned this briefly in the last time we were together, but that culminated at a young age, a fairly young age of 19, when I made a decision to go with three of my friends to light a building on fire and ended up finding myself with a 14-year prison sentence. And the actions that I took in those moments were actions that I did not understand fully in that moment. And when I started to feel the weight of the consequences, I did everything in my power to lie my way out of it and blame other people and all of the things I just said, and eventually had to recognize that, first of all, it didn't work. And second of all, it actually put me at an even greater disadvantage than if I had simply taken ownership of my own actions and recognized the consequences. And I would say that, quite honestly, it wasn't like all of a sudden I had this epiphany and, oh my goodness, handcuffs are on me and I get it. No, it was a journey. It was a journey of probably close to 7 years between the time that I acknowledged that I had done wrong and the time that I recognized that I needed to actually take responsibility for both my choices and the ripple effect, the consequences of that decision. And that was extraordinarily difficult. And it came through a process of recognizing that it wasn't just, oh, I broke a window, because that's what I physically did. It took me a while to even admit that. First I lied. Then I finally said, oh, I broke a window. That's vandalism. That's criminal damage at worst. Oh, okay. I was there while the fire was lit. Okay, fine. I get it. I have to be responsible for that. But it took me a while, like I said, about 7 years before I recognized that just the fact that I have that natural born leader, personality, character, whatever you want to call it, that I was actually responsible, even though I didn't convince anyone to come, even though it wasn't my idea, none of that. No. But Jon, you're a leader. And because you were there, because I was there, I was responsible for the others that were there, for the choices that they made, and for the consequences of those choices. And you put all of that together, and that's a weight of responsibility that belonged to no one but me. But it took me a long time to figure that out.
You know, I think many of us, and there's still a lot of people who don't, but many of us have been there. You know, we've not taken that responsibility in our life. But it's so frustrating because there's so many guys in our group, and Gabe, you'll know this as well. How many guys, when we post something that's maybe positive or uplifting, or well, more so when we're telling people to take accountability, we talk about like relationships, for example. If you let a toxic woman in your life and you get your heart broken, we generally say, look, it was your choice to let that person into your life, and now you're suffering the consequences. How do these people tend to react, Gabe?
According to tens of thousands, and I'm sure, Jon, you know everybody in prison, it's not their fault. It's not our fault, right? It's the other person. There's no innocent people in jail, right? There's no guilty people in jail.
There you go.
They're all the system,
everybody's
man.
Innocent.
It's the system. They're the man keeping us down.
Yeah. And I would go one step further, Josh. I would suggest that it's not just you let them in your life. I'll speak personally, my experience, because I had some choice of people I let into my life. No, not just I let that person in my life. My personality, my energy, if you will, attracted that person. And I remember coming to that conclusion several years ago, and I had to think about, man, I'm noticing, and there was like 3 different people that I had let into my life, let in. See how that still puts it on them, that like they came in and I just didn't oppose them. And I had to realize, no, it wasn't just that I didn't oppose them. I was attracting those people, that type of person, that character of person into my life. And I had to take a personal assessment to say, what is it about Jon that people with that character trait is attracted to? What do I need to change? If I don't like the outcome of that relationship, and it wasn't just romantic, there was a romantic person in there, but there was kind of like a romantic person, a friend, and a mentor that all had this characteristic that I recognized. And I don't want to get too detailed, but what I recognized is that I had a bit of a Messiah complex. So I wanted to be the savior of people and help. So what does that attract? Well, that attracts the person that needs saving, the person that needs. And so I was attracting these people into my life that were not healthy for me, that were not productive in moving forward. They were actually an anchor in my life because they were constantly in need of saving. And it's easy to point to them. Oh man, seriously, there's so much drama. Why do I always have to bail them out? Why can't they just get it together? No. Why am I inviting that? Why am I attracting that energy into my life? And I had to make some systemic changes in my own life, and it's kind of resolved itself because I was able to take that ownership, that personal responsibility. And thankfully, for at least the last couple of years, I haven't had to deal with that.
I have a question for you, Jon. Yeah. So I love your story. I know more about it than maybe some others do. And I love how this topic in and of itself ties into what you do now in leadership coaching and everything. So let's say that I am in the same situation. Everything you're saying is striking in my own life. I have these people around me that I'm attracting at the end of the day, and I'm not taking responsibility. And I want to be a fixer, I want to be a savior and this and that, as you said. But I'm not moving forward in life, and people tell me every day practically, you don't take responsibility, this and that. What can I do to get out from under that situation? What do I do to get away from these people that are dragging me down? And I'm the fall guy. I can say something in the group, hey, you guys want to go to eat now? Nobody hears me, this or that. And then somebody else can say the same thing I just said, and everybody's like, yeah, good idea, Mark. I don't even like Mark. I'm not sure why he's here. He always gets the attention. He just repeats what I say, and people think he's funny. It's not fair at all. Again, that's me not taking responsibility. So what would you say to me in my shoes, how I can kind of move this around in life and get past it?
I think the first thing that anybody has to do that is in a situation like the one you've described, which parallels to what I've described, is we have to recognize that we're not a victim. That's the number one thing, that it's the choices that we are making that are putting us in the position that we find ourselves. Until we get past that, it doesn't matter what else I say, right? I can give you a 3-step process, but until I recognize that it's here, it's Jon that's the problem, or at least until Jon solves this problem. I say this to a lot of people. I'll say, let's say there's an issue between me and Josh, all right? There's conflict of some sort. And I genuinely, in my heart of hearts, believe that this conflict is 99% Josh's fault.
Probably is.
Right? It probably is, he says. And I can point to it. I have facts. I can say, well, Josh has an abrasive personality, or Josh thinks he's big stuff because he runs this giant group. Whatever ideas that I have manufactured in my head, here's the reality that I have to come to as a man. Until I address my 1%, I have no right to even start thinking about Josh's 99%. And what I have found is once I start looking at my 1%, okay, maybe Josh does have whatever personality. Maybe that's all true. What's the 1% that I can actually control? Because I can't control Josh. Let's just be really honest about this. I have no power over Josh's heart and mind. So what's that 1% that I acknowledge is mine? And what usually happens, at least in my life, is once I start to focus on the 1%, I recognize that it's not really just 1%. It's actually 10%, 50%. Maybe I'm the one at the 99%, but because I was outward focused instead of introspective, I was blowing Josh's part way out of proportion while completely ignoring my own issues. So the first thing is we have to recognize that I'm not a victim. I'm not a victim of Josh. I am a person that has agency. I have the right to choose. Between every action and reaction, there's this beautiful space called the right to choose. And that's number one. Now, once I'm there, once I recognize I have that power, I am not subjugated to anyone or anything. I have the power to make choice. Now I can start making the right choices. And so that's when we can say, okay, what's a 3-step process? Well, let's do an inventory. What are my character traits that would lead me in that direction? You mentioned the fact that this ties into what I do now. Hey, I love empowering leaders. Do you think that that is not the same character trait that loves to bail people out? Of course it is. The one is channeled in a positive direction that recognizes an opportunity to help people achieve their destiny. The other is channeled in a negative direction that helps people avoid consequences. but recognizing I've got the choice in where my energy can go. There are conversations. There was actually one just the other day. Somebody sent me a very long message complaining about their boss. There was no personal responsibility. There was no nothing. It was just they were a victim to the nth degree. Do you know what I told them? Absolutely nothing. I did not even respond to the message. Now, that's not my MO. Normally, if you have you take the time to send me a message, I will give you the courtesy of responding to your message. This particular person, there was nothing I had of value. I couldn't speak life into that situation because the life had already been given away to the person that they felt they were being victimized by, which happened to be their boss. So we have to take that. Then we can look at, okay, identify my own character traits. Recognize that I'm responsible for my life, the consequences, all of the results, and then start looking at, okay, what are some actual tangible ways to fix this? Well, let's surround myself with the right people because they're going to influence me to a humongous degree. You guys have a men's group that's built around that idea, right? That you're saying, hey, let's surround ourselves with people that can speak into our life, that can give us good ideas, that can be a sounding board. Absolutely. That's a great strategy. Second strategy, though, is just as important. Don't care what anybody thinks. Stop worrying about, well, do they like me? I was telling my wife just the other day, I said, too often we believe that other people think about us way more than they actually do. Mm-hmm. We really believe that car that just cut us off in traffic was trying to cut us off. No, they were looking at their phone. They didn't even realize you were there. They're not malicious. They're not trying. I mean, sometimes I realize it does happen every once in a while, but as a rule, people are not thinking about us nearly as much as we think they are. I read in a article recently that the writer of this article read a statistic that said at the end of the average person's life, 20 people will be at that funeral. And of the 20 people, which is not very many people, you meet thousands of people in your lifetime, people you work with, people you play with, people you go to church with, people you work out with, people, whatever, right? And he said 20 people on average. I mean, some people have 3, other people have 300, right? But average 20 people. And then of that, only 10% will shed a tear. So now we're down to 2 people. On average, 2 people will cry at your and I's funeral. So why are we so worried about making them cry today if they're not going to cry at the end of our life? And it kind of changes the dynamic of, okay, I'm not trying to go out and insult people. My job is not to tick people off and make them cry and say, screw you. Of course not. But maybe, and I'll go back to my story. What if I just told my friends, no, you guys are idiots. I have every reason to believe that if I had just had the courage to say, I won't do this, they probably wouldn't have either. It would have just taken one person to just say, I'm not doing that. No, I'm not going with you. But I didn't. I was too much of a coward. I cared too much about what they thought. I wanted to be this hot shot. I wanted to be the guy that's evolved with this. And so the minute I say, I don't care if you like me or not, here's where I stand. Here's what I believe in. And that headspace, to go back to your illustration, I'm going to bring this all the way around back to your original question, Gabriel. Marx gives the same idea, and now all of a sudden they think it's a great idea. I don't know who Mark is, but here's what I'll tell you. If this is a real scenario, if somebody is out there and that's exactly how you feel, forget saying, hey, let's go to pizza, so that Mark can say it 5 minutes later and everybody agrees. Say, hey guys, I'm going to pizza. If anybody'd like to join me, I'll be at Marco's. Invite them to join you. If they do, great. If they don't, you're not worried about it. You wanted pizza, and those that want pizza will join you. And those that don't, you don't need to worry about what they wanted for lunch because it doesn't have anything to do with what you wanted for lunch. Now, there's some caveats. You could probably go on some side trails and say, hey, there's times where you serve people.
Sure.
Right? When I came onto this podcast, one of the questions I asked Josh before we went live is, how are we going to serve your audience? What do you want your audience to walk away with? And so we're staying on that topic of personal responsibility. I'm not just going to come on and be like, well, I want to talk about what I want to talk about. No, of course. Right now, the opportunity is to serve an audience. But at the end of the day, if Josh says, well, I really think that you should lie to them and say this and that. No, that doesn't align with my moral compass. So I'm going to be willing to share the truth. And if that's what you want on your podcast, then we can do this podcast together. For the record, Josh never asked me to lie. So please don't misunderstand anything. But yeah, I can invite people to join me. And those are the people I want to do life with anyways, are the people that want to join me, not because I've convinced them to, not because I've lied to them, but because here's my authentic heart. Does your authentic heart resonate with that? If your spirit aligns with my spirit, then we can do life together.
Sure.
And as the saying goes, attract, don't chase. Much simpler way to live life. And you mentioned you wanted to serve the audience best, John. So I'm gonna reel it back in, and I want to ask you, relating to your personal experience of, you mentioned that you and your friends went to burn that building down. If you could speak to your 19-year-old self, what would you say to him in terms of why is personal responsibility so important?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. It's a question that I've had a lot of people ask me. In fact, I had somebody just recently ask me because there's another 19-year, or I think he's 17 actually, 17-year-old kid that's acting kind of recklessly, and he's like, "Hey, what would John have said to John? Because this guy's acting a lot like you did when you were 17." And I said, what's sad is I don't think I would have listened. I don't think there was a magic formula. There was a guy in my father's church who was like, "Man, I wish I could have talked to him. I wish I would have known." I wouldn't have listened. I would have lied. I would have told him what he wanted to hear. And so I think that if I could say something to my 19-year-old self, it wouldn't be much because I wouldn't have listened anyways. But the thing that I think my 19-year-old self needed to recognize is that your choices will determine your destiny. And so when those cuffs are slipping around, I wish that voice had echoed in my head in that moment. This is your choice. Because it did take me a while to get there. And I don't think I would have listened, but maybe a seed could have been planted that you're going to make some choices right now. And it's nobody's fault but John's.
It's a shame because not everyone is going to listen. No. Sometimes we unfortunately have to learn the hard way because so many of us, we've got a very big ego and we don't want to accept that maybe someone else's way might actually just be better than ours, and not a good thing. But what I want to know, John, is you said that it took, you said 7 years roughly for you to start to realise the importance of it. Now, can you just take us through a couple of ways that you've applied the responsibility in your life?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that as we grow, we apply it in different ways. It was 7 years is probably kind of the end of that part of the journey where I really recognized it in its fullest. And it was because of a journey that I took in Arizona. That was where Arizona in the United States is where I was during this whole experience. And in Arizona, once you're sentenced to prison, there's an opportunity for you to work to reduce your sentence through something called clemency. And it's really exactly clemency means mercy. And that's all it is. It's you basically petitioning a board and saying, "I've learned my lesson, please give me some time off." I had been sentenced to 14 years, and the first time that I applied for clemency, I asked for, I believe, 4 of those years to be removed down to 10 years. And I did that because my plea bargain that I had signed had said 7 to 21 with the presumptive, which would be kind of like the middle, if you will, being at 10 and a half. And so my thing was, hey, here's the deal. My co-defendant got 10, got his reduced to 7. How about you just give me that 10? And so it was really still outward focused, and it was saying, hey, I'm willing to take more than the 7, but give me less than the 14. Give me less than the 14, and just give me what you gave the other guy to start, because now he's at 7. It wasn't until I was at, I'm sorry, you know what? I just messed up the story. The first time I went all the way to 7, give me what he got. You gave him 7, give me 7. It wasn't until it was the second time that I said, okay, how about we go all the way to 10 and a half? Not because that was what I agreed to, but because now I'm serving more time than the other two because I was more culpable based on my leadership personality. And just recognizing that I was culpable was a big step for me because I hadn't ever identified that before. So how do I apply it, right? I talked about applying it in with friends and relationships. I also could tell you that there was a time where I was accused of some things that were not accurate. Now, what happens when we get accused of things that are not accurate? Usually we go into defense mode, right? We tend to start, no, that's not true, and that person's starting rumors and blah, 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 blah. Well, thankfully, I had progressed through the journey enough where I said, Okay, I know that's not true because it's me. So I know what is and what isn't. But why would they think it is? What is it about me that would make that rumor seem like it could be true? Now that's changing the script, right? Because we're not even talking now fact versus not fact. We're asking, what about me invited the lie? What about me would result in them wanting to start that rumor? And just coming at it from the perspective, and I'm going to be honest, I never actually figured out exactly what it was, but I think it was really healthy to just start from that premise. Not what's wrong with them, not what are they trying to do, not how dare they. Why would they think that about me? What is it about me that has them think that? And that story or that line has continued. Just, I don't know, a few weeks ago, my wife asked me a question. She made an assumption about me, about something. I don't even remember what it was. And I said, no, I didn't do that, but I'm curious why you would think I would. That may mean, and I think it was something to do with something I said. And so it revealed to me, if I remember correctly, it revealed to me that I was being too sarcastic. Because even though I wasn't guilty of whatever it was she asked about, I was like, but the fact that you thought I might be tells me that there's something else going on that I need to address. And so I think that just, again, coming at it from the perspective, what's my 1%? What is it about me? What am I attracting? Can't force anything, can't chase it, but I'm attracting something. What is it that I'm attracting? I think that has been the biggest lesson that's just reverberated for the last now 15 years.
It's, in fact, you know what? I'm going to let Gabe speak because I've been talking too much today.
Right.
So go on, Gabe. You share your insight.
Sure. Well, I like the first thing that you said with this line of questioning. My mentor that had put me into a leadership position, he has like 8 life rules. And the very first one is the choices you make dictate the life you lead. And if I could go back to my younger self as well, I would say the same thing. We wouldn't have listened, right? We knew it all at that time. Hopefully we...
I wish I could go back to being 15 to know everything again.
Absolutely, man. I'd have put all that money into Amazon and Netflix, but whatever. It is what it is. Can't cry over those things anymore. But in terms of what you're saying about looking at it from the other side of the aisle and addressing what their issue is with you, before, just even while you were talking, I was thinking about people who I have just totally written off in my life. I'm like, you're a terrible, horrible person. But I don't think I've ever sat there and thought about why are they coming at me sideways like this? You know, I just haven't. You know, maybe I'm having an epiphany sitting here. But it's so easy to just write off what they're saying because, as you said, you know you, and you know how you come across to people most of the time. Sometimes you don't know. But it's just so easy to write them off and be like, well, clearly they don't know me. Well, maybe they do and maybe they don't, but where are they coming from? What is that? So yeah, I liked where you were saying that, and now I'm reflecting on it. So
there's another saying that says we tend to judge others by their actions and ourselves by our motives. Right? And so we will say to ourselves, well, I meant well. As opposed to other people, how could you do that?
Yeah.
Right? And I think we would do better to flip that script. If we want to start looking at personality, how could I do that? And they meant well. And if we start flipping that around, it lends itself to personal responsibility because it stops putting ourselves in the judge and jury seat and instead puts ourselves, or if it does, it puts ourselves in the judge and jury seat for ourselves, but nobody else. And I think that that's really a healthy way to proceed. Give people the benefit of the doubt that we would want to receive, but man, check ourselves at every chance. And even when we think, I had pretty good motives, it's like, but do I? What was I really hoping for? How was I really hoping that would go? And I think that when we start doing that and we start looking deep inside of ourselves, we might be a little bit surprised at what we find. We might find that we're not quite as good of a person as we thought we were, and it gives us something to work on.
Sure. Another question I had that I was thinking about, you used the word coward. So say that I am a coward and it's scary for me to take responsibility, especially when something goes awry, such as burning down a building or something, or even at work, something comes up and I would Well, I delegated that task, so I don't have to take ownership. How do I overcome that fear of taking the ownership and the responsibilities and the punishments?
I would say there's two things that really go into that. The first one is, if you're going to lead well, and whether that's formal leadership or not, it could just be you're being a big brother or you're being a parent or something like that. But if you're going to lead well, you are going to have to be okay with the idea that at the end of the day, you have absolutely nothing more than being able to lay your head on your pillow and know you did the right thing. If you can't get to that point, you're not going to be effective. You're going to be a coward because you're always going to be looking for what other people think of you, and you're always going to be looking for your approval ratings. So it has to start there and just say, you know what, I'm going to do my very best. And if that's not enough, I don't know what to tell you. The second thing is, and this is kind of a cheat because this strokes the ego, so I almost hate to bring it up, but the reality is that everyone has more respect for the guy that takes the ownership. We're scared to death of the consequences. We're scared to death to say, that was me. And yet, most of the time, the whole room will defend the guy who says, it was me, and they will chastise the guy that says, wasn't me. And I'll use a super silly example that I guarantee will resonate with especially any man that's watching this. If you fart and you own it, it's a laugh and it moves on. If you fart and you deny it, you're never going to live it down. You fart, wasn't me. He who smelt it dealt it. I mean, the denier's the cry, right? Everybody, there's all this stuff. And everyone knows, oh man, it's frickin' Gabe again. But if you're oh, dude, man, I'm sorry, guys. I did not mean to let that out. No, that was me. I'll own that. Mm-hmm. It's dropped.
Laugh and move on.
It's dropped. And I could give you a whole bunch of examples of times where I've just said, hey, that was me. Mm-hmm. That was me. I'll take ownership of that. But honestly, I think that there's probably a more powerful story than anyone I can give, and that's the one that Jocko gives in his keynote speech. Have you ever watched Jocko's keynote speech?
It's Blue on Blues.
That's his whole brand is all about extreme ownership, right? And he talks about the time where he went in and he expected to lose his job. He expected to be court-martialed over what he did, but he took ownership, and that's where respect is built. Mm-hmm. Respect is built on the back of someone saying, you want to throw a stone? Throw it here. I'm your target. Don't worry about anybody else. I'm the target. And in my life, that's a perfect example because I lied and I tried to push off blame and guess what? Nobody bought it. And the newspapers and everything else said, John's a jerk, John's an idiot, John's a moron, and if I just said, I did it, I take full responsibility, do whatever you have to do, my bad. What are they going to say? I already said it all. I've already said the things that they want to say, and it's like, hurting a handicapped person, right? It's like, what are you doing? The guy's already down. Why are you beating him up? It doesn't make any sense. And so, from an ego perspective, I would just say, dude, your ace is actually to take responsibility. You don't even have to be afraid. You can go into that going, hey, if I go take responsibility, what are they going to do to me? Because I guarantee you, if you don't take responsibility, that's when things get much harder.
It's great because when you just accept that, you take that extreme ownership, you are right when you say that it's power to yourself, because what more can someone say to you? Yes, it was me. It was me. I fired. They no longer have any power over you when you can say that, and that's it. There's nothing else they can do. Yeah. But if you were to say, "Oh no, it wasn't me," they're always kind of going to be suspicious, or they're probably not going to feel very trusting towards you, especially if they know for sure that it was you. So I'm all for the extreme ownership. I really resonate with that for sure. But one thing that you mentioned earlier, John, and I'm actually a little bit curious now. You mentioned, I think Gabe mentioned that you do leadership coaching for people. Yeah. And to go from someone who went to prison for a number of years at a very young age, you mentioned your journey of, learning about how to become a more responsible guy. How has your life changed since you started to take more responsibility?
It's interesting because I would say in every way and in no way. In no way, because in a lot of cases, things don't look that different. The difference is the way things looked before is very different than the way they actually were. Now the way they look is the way they are. So it was superficial before. It was a facade. It was all this smoke and mirrors. Now I get the real opportunity to invest in people's lives. I ran a workshop 2 days ago in New Mexico, and I told the guys, I said, I don't trust leaders who haven't failed. Because there's only one of two possibilities, in my opinion. Either they're lying, because everybody's failed, or if somehow they really haven't failed, they're what I would call a knight in shining armor. They've got all of the garb. They're a knight. They're in the queen's army, but they haven't gone to battle. They haven't gone through anything. They haven't actually faced anything. Knights that went to battle and actually accomplished something came back dinged and scratched and scuffed and muddy and bloody, and you could tell they'd actually accomplished something. And I told the group that I was speaking to on Friday, I said, if I hadn't taken responsibility, if I hadn't gone through what I've gone through and learned what I've learned, I got no right to talk to you. The topic the workshop I was running was a workshop on failure and how failure is a stepping stone to success. But it's only a stepping stone when we own that failure, when we learn from that failure, and then we can help other people do the same thing. And so how is my life different? Well, it's real. It's actually authentic now, and it completely wasn't before. But it's because I wasn't willing to take ownership. I was always blaming somebody else. And again, if it was good, I took the credit. If it was bad, I shifted the blame. Now I tend to do the opposite. If it's bad, I take the ownership. And if it's good, I deflect that to anybody else on the team that contributed to what happened, because I'm a firm believer that we are all turtles on fence posts. And people that don't know what that means, I would ask them, have you ever seen a turtle on a fence post? And of course, the answer is probably no. But I'll tell you, if you ever do see a turtle on a fence post, I guarantee you they didn't get there by themselves. And I don't feel like I got to where I am by myself. It's by many other people who have invested in me and just spoken into my life. And so what's different? Everything. And also nothing. It doesn't always look different, but sometimes the intrinsic nature of it is radically changed.
I like what you're saying there about when you take ownership, you gain the respect of others around you. And I found that to be true in my position, where I've taken the blame for things that I know full well that wasn't on me, but I took the blame. The person I took the blame for came to me later and said, I appreciate you taking the blame for that. That was on me. I'm like, hey man, we're a team, this and that. And that made them willing to do more for me after that point. Cause they're like, Gabe's got my back, he'll praise me in public. And if something goes awry, he'll tell me in private. It's just, you gain an immense amount of respect from your employees and your fellow coaches.
One thing that I've personally experienced through becoming more responsible is, or at least taking more responsibility, is I feel like I've become more productive. Like I can just crack on with something and get on with it. There's much less resistance. I don't know if you found that to be the case at all, John.
Yeah, I think the idea of ownership means that there's no excuses. So if I'm going to do it, I got to do it. I can't, something that not a lot of people know. I went full time with my personal business this week. No one to blame. Either if we succeed or if we fail, it's on me. And you're absolutely right. The minute you start taking ownership, you just got to do it. There's no, well, I'm going to try. No, there isn't. To quote Yoda, there is no try. Do or do not. There is no try. Just get it done. And so I agree with you. I think that ownership places us in a position to be a victor. When we don't take ownership, we are in position to be a victim. But when we take ownership, we can be a victor because we understand it's going to be my choices. Tomorrow, when it's time to work, fail or succeed, the question is not, did I fail or succeed? The question is, did I make the calls? Did I send the emails? Did I do the outreach? Did I prepare? Did I do the things that were necessary for success? And if the answer is no, well, it's not TikTok's fault for distracting me. It's not somebody's fault for asking questions. It's, what did I do? Did I set my business up for success? Did I set me up for success or not? And if the answer is no, okay, am I going to learn from that? And are we going to move forward, or are we going to keep making excuses and never actually make anything out of this business?
I like that. It makes me think back to where did it all start? with this refusal to take ownership, right? The woman which thou hast given me gave me the fruit. You know? It goes all the way back. Now, thanks for that, John. I'm going to wonder how to put this into a sermon to preach when my family goes on vacation and I'm stuck there at the church preaching. So I'm sure there's more in that sense, but it's an age-old problem. And I like the tools that you're giving us in our toolbox to start looking at things differently and start taking accountability. And to the audience that are watching, I'm pointing at you with my pen. Start incorporating some of these things, and you can drop a comment or whatever to engage, or you can message John or Josh or myself and let us know how implementing these things change your life, and how you're starting to see your relationships improve. And just like he said, everything changed while at the same time nothing changed. So I encourage you to take this wisdom that John's dropping. There's a couple J's in these names. They both got red hair to some extent. Sorry. But make sure to incorporate these things, because these are life lessons that have been learned over time that you don't have to learn. Any fool can learn from their own lessons. It takes a wise man to learn from.
I really like how, John, you said that your life changed but didn't change at the same time, because it's like the Matrix. People are still plugged in. You're not living in the real world. That's not reality. You have to really step outside yourself and realize this is how it is. I have to take that ownership, and when you do, you'll have so much more power over yourself and thus power over your life. And you'll start achieving more, you'll start being more productive, you'll start feeling so much better. I could not recommend it enough. And with that being said, I think we've pretty much covered everything today. So I think we're going to wrap things up pretty soon. But John, Gabe, is there any final things you want to touch on before we end the episode?
I'll let John close this out, but congratulations going full-time with your business. I hope that it all goes well for you. We'd love to have you back on the podcast again, make a third appearance.
Yeah, it would be a privilege to come back. And the businesses, we're gonna be working hard to empower those frontline leaders. Gabe, you know my passion for that, as I've had the privilege of being a part of your journey a little bit with that.
Yep.
Of course, if anybody knows of anybody that needs corporate help, I would love to hear from you about that as we get started. But I think the last remark that I would give is just don't force yourself into a 14-year prison sentence to learn this lesson. That would be my thing. Don't lose a 15-year marriage. Don't lose your career. Whatever it is. To Gabe's point, to Josh's point, I can't force you. Just like I couldn't have forced my 15-year-old self. But I can invite you to join me in this lesson and say, look, it cost me dearly. It cost me years of my life. It cost me close friends and acquaintances. It cost me love. I mean, it cost me so much. It doesn't have to cost you that much unless you force that issue. And so that would be my just invitation to anyone who's listening. Whatever it is, choose to start taking that responsibility in your relationships, in your job, in your community, in your life. I invite you to take that responsibility, and you might just be surprised at how amazingly it works out for you. Yeah, servantmindedleadership.com is the website. Contact at Servant Minded Leadership for the...
Well, John, I really appreciate those final words. It's been very inspirational. And I'd like to thank you for coming on today and sharing your story and really just helping the audience see the value of just being more responsible. And with that being said, I hope you guys have enjoyed watching today's podcast. If you've like to leave us a like and a comment, really helps with the algorithm. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys. That is episode 11, probably, of the Men's Self-Improvement Podcast. Thanks for watching.